Hi everyone. So last but definitely not least, we have Gerda, a co-founder of CRO agency, Qualitative. Through her agency, she sees firsthand that CRO means many things to many people, but Gerda likes to think we're all fixing the internet one website at a time. And the world is filled with bad UX and dirty marketing tactics that are used to get people to consume anything that's put in front of them. In the midst of that, CRO can be an antidote if you do it right. So Gerda's session will give you two practical tools that speed up your optimization learning and research: website visual flows and data dictionaries. Please ask any questions you have along the way in the chat. Now I'll hand over to Gerda.
Thank you, Marcella, for that intro. And thank you to everyone who has joined here live. It truly means a lot. I almost can't believe there are so many people that care about websites and data to be here. But no, I'm kidding. I know there's many of us out there. But yeah, I hope you had a great day interacting with the other speakers. As mentioned, this is the last talk of today. So let's get this show on the road because there is much to discuss. So I am here today to tell you about two tools, mental models, frameworks, whatever type of word you want to use for these things that have really helped me in my own CRO work and made my job easier. So I just wanted to share those with you as well. And most of my career I have spent on the agency side of things, being a CRO service provider, which means that I do project-based work. And I've done tons of projects across different industries. And that's actually one of the things that I really love about this job is the variety and the opportunity to learn about how different organizations function in different industries. However, that type of job also comes with a lot of context switching. And I read somewhere once, I have no idea if this is true, but it said that for internal in-house employees, it can take up to 6 months to feel that they actually understand how the organization works and to actually feel that they can do their job properly, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. I certainly can. But as an external consultant, you obviously don't have that type of luxury to take 6 months. We need to be able to go in quickly and grasp what the problems are and what we're supposed to do here, right? So in the beginning of each project, we have this initial period for auditing things, scoping out what needs to be done and what are the problems we're about to solve on the website. So one of the things that has really helped me cut that time sort of shorter or help me gain that understanding quicker about how the website works together is creating a visual journey map. And I like to use this analogy here that's so if you travel to a completely new place in the world that you hadn't been to before, what's the first thing you're going to do? I would bet that you at least open up Google Maps for a sec to see where your hotel is situated compared to the places that you want to go to and what are the possible paths that you can take to get there. So this process has a really similar vibe, and the process is really simple. It's just you sitting down, starting from your homepage or your most important landing page, taking a screenshot of that page, identifying all of the buttons and links or actions that a potential user can take, clicking through them, and then repeating that process and taking a screenshot of all the next steps, and then eventually putting those screenshots in a visual tool like Figma. I like to use Figma, but you can use whatever works for you, obviously. And just drawing arrows and kind of like creating this mental map of what are even all the possible steps and content existing on the website. And in the process, you should also be taking a lot of notes about anything that's interesting or confusing or might be useful for your testing strategy, for example. So what might that actually look like in real life? So on the right side, you see an example of one of those website maps. That's a real project that I did a while back. And it's interesting because if you look at the first part of it, it's very simple, just like a single step sign up flow. But as you get deeper into the product, it starts to branch out like a web, and there are so many more potential options of where you can go. So it's really good to have that bird's eye view to even understand what are the possible paths for your customers to take. And on the left side, it's a picture of what you may look like after you've completed this process, because it does feel a little bit like putting together a conspiracy theory, or almost like a murder investigator tying things together with red yarn or something like that. So you'll get this holistic sort of view of what even exists on your website. And a while back, I did write an article about this process too that I linked over here if you want to read more about how I think about this process, what to look for, and what are the benefits. So check that out if you're interested. But I want to be super clear here that this is not a customer journey map, because just based on this process, we can't really predict which way our actual customers are navigating those paths. For that, we obviously need to talk to them or observe them through user testing or whatever other CRO research methods are available to you. So please do proper research for understanding how your actual customers navigate on the site. This is just for your own understanding and your team's understanding of how things are situated on the site. And I also would like to make a note to all the AI enthusiasts here, because if there aren't already tools to do this, I'm sure tomorrow there will be, where you could probably plug in a URL and it will spit out a sitemap or something similar that I showed you. But I truly do believe that the value of going through this process is you as the human being sitting down and optimizing things for other humans, right? So you like really taking a deeper look at each of those steps, thinking through if everything makes sense. Should this content be there? Should this action be there? Does it fit together logically from a possible user's perspective? So do the manual labor. And the other good thing about doing this process is that it will sort of uncover the blind spots of your website. And one of those areas I find can often be thank you pages, for example. Because obviously when you optimize forms or sign up flows, the main purpose of that is to get the conversion. So most of the manpower goes to optimizing those forms and steps. But thank you pages too, actually, especially for new customers, are that needed step that support your UX and brand perception and sort of give that extra confirmation that you're in the right place. And if a page looks that bare after a customer has given you their personal information, it can cause frustration. And often these pages just simply get overlooked because the optimization effort goes to the first steps. The other area that often gets overlooked are super long landing pages, especially on mobile. And it's good to understand how many of those long pages you have. And again, this page probably has specific sections on it that get the sort of heat and the optimization efforts directed to them, like a forum or specific messaging. But how often do we zoom out and look the page holistically in that sense, or even know how many of these types of pages there are? Are they necessary? Can we cut them down and make things easier for our customers, right? So let's say that you have gone through this manual process of putting things into context, creating that visual understanding for yourself and your team. And you want to move on to bigger and better things, like perhaps starting an experimentation program or making changes on your site. So it's probably time to start thinking about data and tracking. And I promise that at the end of the presentation, I'm going to come back and tell you what the actual connection between these two tools are. But what do I mean when I say a data dictionary? So very simply put, a data dictionary is a resource that will very clearly communicate what is tracked on your website, how it is tracked on your website, and why it is tracked on your website. And as you embark on this journey of creating something like this, I've laid out 4 questions that are good to ask of yourself and of your organization to understand where you're at. The first is, obviously, has anyone ever documented your analytics setup in your organization? Because from personal experience, again, I can say that over the past 7 years or so, when I've done these CRO projects, I have never had a project where in the beginning, a team has been able to hand over a resource like this or clearly explain how their tracking has been set up. And I find that this is not very much an issue of lack of technical skill or know-how, as much as it is actually a communication and a shared language issue. Because ideally, your entire marketing team should understand how to use this type of resource, even if they are not directly involved with the tracking implementation. And if you have 10 people in your team and you ask each of them, hey, how do we even define a conversion and how is it tracked on our website? You're probably going to get 10 different answers because there is, as many humans as you have, then there's as many ways to describe something, right? If you haven't worked on creating that shared knowledge and language. And if you read one analytics article this year, please make it this one, because it's truly one of those stories that I keep referring to everyone and coming back to, even though it is a couple of years old right now. But it is basically a story of a Southeast Asia's one of the super apps, and the author, how she joined that team and basically took it from 0 to 100 people in the business intelligence department. And when she joined, she basically describes a similar scenario where, an IT guy was running their SQL queries, which were all wrong, and nobody in the team actually knew how to define a conversion, and the data efforts were just all over the place. And they ended up going from 20K orders per day to 5 million. It's really an amazing read and super simple to understand also, even if you are not directly involved in data tracking. And it also lays out a process of how to create one of those data dictionaries, because there's obviously many ways to go about it, and it approaches it from a more general marketing perspective. So check that out if you're interested in that. However, I am a CRO person working with experimentation, so my sort of perspective will be from that angle. And at this point, I really do believe that if you don't have a proper analytics documentation and process, you don't have a proper foundation for starting an experimentation program. And we often find in our work that actually the need and want in organizations to do experimentation is a great catalyst for doing a data dictionary and getting those data things in order. Because again, as I mentioned in the beginning of each project, we have that scoping and auditing period. And as a part of that, we have to look at the analytics setup to understand what the data quality is, how much work needs to be done before we actually can launch experiments. And the first question that we have to ask ourselves is always, are we looking at user behavior here, or are we looking at a bunch of tracking errors? And unfortunately, most of the time it's the latter, and a lot of work needs to be done before we can launch anything. And those tracking errors often lead to wrong business conclusions, and they can come from the most random, simple places. And just 2 examples here that I see super often, just because something is triggered twice, or some tag is firing somewhere that somebody forgot about. For example, conversions or page views are counted twice, which obviously inflates the real data and puts a huge dent on MDE calculations as well, which you would ideally do before you launch any experiment to understand how long to run them and stuff. And just other random things like page titles not set that can make it hard to even understand where to focus your optimization efforts, because you need to know which pages have the most traffic and which are most important and so on. And all of this has really made me come to the conclusion that most organizations view tracking in general as a dev problem, because it is so highly technical and so few people in the team usually can do and understand it. But at the end of the day, why are we doing the tracking, right? Like, the data that we're gathering through this tracking should be used by the marketers and the people that improve UX and work with customers to improve things. So I would argue that tracking is also 100% a UX and marketing problem. And the teams really should work on, I guess, lessening that gap between that understanding and coming together on this project. So how do we solve this issue in real life? So this is an example of an Airtable template that we have created for our own little agency, and that we use with all of our clients for managing the entire CRO experimentation program. And I mean everything from gathering, storing research insights, to making them into test ideas, to managing the live experiments, to the audits, to everything, prioritization, everything in between. But I'm not going to go into all of that at the moment, obviously, because that should be its own conference talk on how to manage your experimentation program. But for us, the only way that it made sense to do the data dictionary was to implement it into that process and into that template. And the data dictionary part is those 4 tabs that I've highlighted here: metrics, events, parameters, and other tools that, again, tie together with all the other stuff in your experimentation program. And at the end, I'll tell you how to get this template for yourself if you're interested in seeing it or using it. So what are the details? How is it actually set up? So even if companies do have some sort of documentation around analytics, the part that is often missing is the human readable part, the part that the less technical people can actually understand, and the part that is tied to your business goals, with visualization of what is happening on the front end when those metrics and tags are firing in the back end. So that is the metrics tab, the most important part to tie everything together to your business goals. And then the rest is the technical details for your implementation team on how things are set up in the actual analytics. This is mostly built for GA4, but since most of our analytics platforms these days have the event parameter structure, you can customize it to whatever you're using as well. And other tools is ideally your entire tool stack that you use for experimentation, like an A/B testing tool like Convert, for example, or if you use Google Ads or whatever, and you can tie all that together in here and also take notes on how the tracking differs from your analytics setup. And we did just launch a complimentary article to this as well that goes way more into detail about what is the purpose of this, how things are set up. So you can check that out on my website as well. And we are also working on a super technical guide that explains all of these tabs and columns in way more detail, how to think about them, why set them up, and so on. So you can sign up for notifications if you're interested in that as well. So how do you set yourself up for success with your data dictionary? A good one, again, offers this holistic view with visuals. I really feel that that is the important part for the less technical people to understand what is actually happening UX-wise for the customer in the front end when we are gathering that data. And then the other more implementation technical part of how these things are exactly tracked inside the analytics tool. And the best way to go about it really is to get your stakeholders together and map out the business goals first and then set up the tracking, not the other way around. Because there's no point in tracking absolutely everything without really understanding if anyone at all in your team will be using this data and what for. So every single thing that you track really should be tied to a specific business goal and have the why behind it, why we need to track it, who will use it for what, basically. And from the soft skills side, really work on that shared language within your organization. Like ideally, all of your team members should understand what is our main conversion, how do we define it, and how is it achieved on the website. And as with most things in experimentation, this is not a one-off project. It should be a living, breathing document that gets constantly updated as things change on your website. So the best thing to do is assign a clear owner, somebody that understands the implementation, but also understands that the marketing team needs to be able to use it and understand it. And that keeps this process ongoing. So what is the connection between the two? So your visual journey map of the website is basically the process of you stepping through the screens from a new visitor's perspective. So really try to put yourself in the shoes of somebody that has never heard of you before and that is looking at the site for the first time. And by going through that process, you'll be able to create that understanding for yourself too, of how many possible paths there even are on your website for somebody to take. And then the data dictionary part is understanding what fires behind each of those screens and steps and actions. And together they sort of create this visual reference for anyone to come in, understand your business context and web infrastructure. Because let's say you're not even working with external partners like me that need to come in and quickly understand what's going on. I think the average time for like a tech employee to spend in one company these days is, I don't know, a year, maybe two. So teams do switch and change all the time. And this is also one of the things that we see often is that somebody leaves the company and a bunch of this knowledge is lost because it only lived on in your employees' brains and nobody has started this type of process or effort to actually document things, create the shared language, even agree on what we call certain metrics in our system. So that can cause a lot of problems as well if you call the same thing by 10 different names and sort of duplicate your efforts in a way. So how do you get this template for free? DM me on LinkedIn or send me an email. And obviously I could have put the link in here, but we're marketers and I thought it would be nice for us to connect. So don't be shy, just reach out. I'm pretty friendly. So, and I'll just send you the link with no strings attached or anything. So yeah, just reach out to me. And I would like to leave you with this quote by Mark Manson, because none of the things that I talked about here today are these hyper technological innovation advancements that no one's ever heard of. Probably quite the opposite. And if you really want to boil down like what those things are, they're documentation. And we all know that having documentation is better than not having documentation in a way, right? But documentation does sound kind of boring and tedious, I guess. So that's also why I didn't call this talk Experimentation Documentation, because none of you would have probably showed up and I wouldn't have blamed you. And it also just makes me think of the analogy of, when people start optimizing their physical health, for example, we often look for that new innovative vitamin or some sort of fat diet that would or that promises to fix all of our problems, when in reality, we know that if we would simply drink more water, go on more walks, and look less at our phone, like things would improve pretty quickly. And that again has like a really similar vibe to me with the experimentation, where we know that we should be doing these things consistently and documenting our efforts and sharing the language and improving communication, but are we actually doing those things consistently enough to see the benefit of it? And honestly, it's as much of a reminder to myself as it is to anyone else. And yeah, that's it from me today. I hope you found some inspiration from these documentation efforts that I laid out here. And I hope you had a great conference day. Yeah, reach out to me and let's chat in the lobby and on LinkedIn.
Thank you,
Enjoy the
Gerda.
closing ceremonies.
That was great and really resource heavy as well. Personally, that why most analytics efforts fails made it to the top of my reading list now. We had 2 questions in the chat during, both around shared language. So I'll just put those to you. So Shirley asked, do you have any practical tips on how to create a shared language within your organization?
Yeah, I think the key here is to agree on the terminology, especially on the metrics parameter side of how we actually define things. And as I mentioned earlier too, like make sure that people aren't calling the same thing different things in your systems and sort of duplicating the efforts, and just really like set rules around what are our naming conventions of things, and again the business goals as well. So that's like a great start, I think, already.
And similarly, Dewey asks, do you have any tips on helping product and marketing teams to develop a shared language around analytics? For example, segmentation for marketers and UX people differs.
Again, I think it's one of those things where you just have to get the people together and just have those conversations, and or at least try to work not in silos. And I know that especially in large organizations, that's super difficult if the efforts are sort of spread out across different departments and whatever, but really try to get that cross departmental communication going. Just reach out to people, say, hey, I think we're working on the same thing. Can we just have a call or a meeting and set some ground rules of how we're supposed to do these things? Like, I know it sounds so simple and naive, but I think that's really is the key here, to just try to like actively communicate what you're doing and understand who you need to work together with on those efforts.
Yeah, just beginning that conversation and developing it over time, I guess. Well, thank you very much, Gerda. So now in the other session, we'll have some closing statements from Tiffany to round off the conference. Gerda's contact details are here. Do get in touch with her for all of those amazing templates and content that she's coming out with. So I'm going to end this session now, but thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.